Prince Harry's return to the UK wasn't met with cheers or flashing cameras. It was met with silence. No photographers scrambling, no waving crowds, no buzz. For a man who was once the nation's golden boy, the soldier prince who carried Diana's spark and the public's affection, that silence was louder than scandal, but it wasn't unexpected. This was the outcome of years of burned bridges, awkward interviews, and too many tell-alls that eroded trust. Harry reportedly flew in armed with demands: security, press control, special treatment, as though he still held authority. Yet Britain's response wasn't dramatic. It wasn't anger. It was worse, cold indifference. And that's what cuts deepest. Hatred at least means you matter. Silence means the opposite. A country that once adored him no longer reacts at all. The prince who once symbolized hope has become a man his homeland has quietly outgrown, and perhaps finally moved on from. No royal aides met him. No family members appeared. Not even the faintest acknowledgement from the palace. It was like watching a man knock on a door he himself slammed years ago, only to discover no one remained on the other side. Harry's fall from grace was never sudden. It unfolded slowly, painfully in the public eye. Each choice, each interview, each revelation chipping away at the image that once made him beloved. At first, people blamed Meghan for pulling him away from royal life, but over time, that shifted. Now, the finger points to him. Because at some point, Harry stopped being the prince swept away by love and started being the man who couldn't stop talking about it. Every camera appearance turned into another complaint, another family drama, another deal that looked more opportunistic than heartfelt. The spotlight he once thrived in became his curse. Once cherished by the press, he's now ignored, or worse, mocked. Headlines don't celebrate him anymore. They dismiss him as irrelevant. That's the weight of public opinion. Once you lose the crowd, there's no walking back expecting applause. Harry thought he could live in two worlds, the freedom of California and the reverence of the crown. But reality doesn't bend that way. You can't tear down the institution and then expect it to shield you when the winds turn cold. The real sting is how the tone has shifted. Once, he was seen as breaking free. Now, he's seen as desperate. What once looked bold now feels bitter. People remember the Netflix projects, the Oprah interview, the memoir that ripped open royal life. But instead of sympathy, there's fatigue. The same story plays on repeat, just with bigger cameras and bigger checks. What once looked like honesty now reads as strategy. Vulnerability turned into branding. And that's where the damage lies. Royalty survives on mystique, silence, and dignity. Harry traded all that for exposure. And now the public sees a product, not a prince. Even the palace, long known for silence, has shown no sign of concern. King Charles is preoccupied with royal duties, and William is focused on safeguarding the monarchy's future. No one is willing to babysit a prince who chose to leave, but still expects the privileges of staying. The cold shoulder Harry faced wasn't a scheduling conflict. It was a statement. A message from both crown and country. We're done. No more warm welcomes. No more unquestioned loyalty. Only polite distance and quiet rejection. And that silence has become the loudest thing Harry has heard in years. Once his reputation carried weight. A smile, a wave, even a small gesture could shift public mood. He was the relatable royal, the one who joked with reporters, hugged fans, and walked behind his mother's casket with quiet strength. People felt he belonged to them. He wasn't just royalty, he was theirs. But that bond is gone. Somewhere along the line, he stopped feeling familiar and started feeling like a stranger, foreign. That's what Harry feels like now. The charm faded, the connection broke. When his name appears in headlines, it's no longer admiration but eye rolls. The narrative flipped because Harry stopped listening. He traded relatability for righteousness, treating every platform like a pulpit. Each new interview drew less interest, not because people didn't care, but because they'd heard it all before. What once felt raw turned repetitive. You can only say my family hurt me so many times before the world tunes out, especially when the message comes wrapped in million-dollar contracts and glossy shots of him and Meghan in Montecito. The public wasn't cold. They gave him grace. When he stepped back, they understood. When he said the palace failed him, they sympathized. But when departures turned into exposés, patience ran out. Sympathy faded into exhaustion. And the prince who once inspired now feels like a stranger. When pain turned into PR strategy, the tide shifted. People began to question intentions. Was Harry truly seeking healing, or was it just another chapter packaged to sell? That's the danger of monetizing trauma. It blurs the line between truth and performance. And once that line disappears, trust goes with it. In the UK, loyalty to the crown runs deep, even among critics. There's an unspoken rule: protect the family name, even when it hurts. Harry broke that rule repeatedly. He took private conversations and broadcast them to the world. He turned decades of royal tension into public spectacle. Some applauded the openness, calling it courage. But many saw betrayal, not just of an institution, but of something more sacred: family. That cut deeper than any headline. And it's why Harry is no longer viewed as a truth-teller, but as a man who sold his past for applause that never truly came. Meanwhile, the royal machine moved forward, William stepping closer to his role, Kate remaining steady at his side. The monarchy carried on as it always has: quiet, steady, untouched by noise. That silence only made Harry's voice seem louder, more out of place. His mission to redefine royalty clashed with an institution rooted in tradition. He exposed flaws, but he misjudged its strength. The crown doesn't argue, it endures. And the harder he pushed for a response, the clearer it became that none would ever come. That silence isn't passivity, it's strategy. Let him speak. Let headlines churn. Sooner or later, the noise fades. But Harry remains, still talking, unaware the room around him has emptied. Even loyal supporters have grown quiet. Not angry, not wounded, just tired. And that's the threat he faces now. Not outrage, but indifference. Because in the royal world, silence isn't weakness. It's power. And when silence outlasts the noise, the one still speaking doesn't look bold. He looks irrelevant. In the royal world, silence isn't just golden. It's powerful. And Harry, once celebrated for his simplicity and charm, now finds himself in the position no royal ever wants, speaking endlessly while no one listens. The harshest truth he faces isn't media criticism or family backlash. It's the absence of interest. Indifference is more wounding than hatred. When people stop reacting, stop defending, stop even arguing, that's when you've truly lost them. For Harry, raised under constant attention, watched, praised, and protected, this silence feels not only unfamiliar, but terrifying. California was supposed to be the fresh start, the chance to create a new identity on his own terms. Yet no matter how far he goes, the royal shadow clings. Every new project, every interview, every attempt at reinvention seems to circle back to the same subject: the monarchy he tried to leave behind. And the public has noticed. What once looked like independence now feels like obsession. Harry hasn't escaped the crown. He's become bound to it more tightly than ever. Harry now seems trapped in orbit around the very system he vowed to escape, constantly referencing it to remain relevant. The pattern has grown predictable: interview, accusation, deal, controversy, repeat. At first, it sparked interest, then curiosity, then fatigue. And now, irritation. What began as a bold breakaway has devolved into a soap opera that refuses to end. The audience is still watching, but they're no longer cheering. They're scrolling past, because no matter how dramatic the headlines sound, the story feels tired. The irony is painful. Harry once held everything: public respect, a powerful legacy, and a connection to people that most royals could only dream of. He had the chance to be the bridge between tradition and modernity, the prince who evolved with the times. But instead of building on that, he tried to tear it down. Now he stands alone in the ashes, wondering why no one followed. And his critics are no longer just palace loyalists. They're ordinary people. Even those who once defended Harry are beginning to step back. These were the people who believed his pain, who cheered for his freedom. But now they're pulling away, not because they've suddenly embraced the monarchy, but because Harry doesn't feel genuine anymore. Every gesture seems rehearsed, every grievance monetized. The raw honesty that once made him relatable now feels buried under glossy production. Even the media, once eager for every royal revelation, has grown weary. There are only so many times you can headline "Royal Exile Speaks Out Again" before it stops feeling like news, and Harry never seemed prepared for that shift, the moment when cameras turn away, not because they're blocked, but because they're bored. In today's culture of constant novelty, even controversy has an expiration date. And perhaps the harshest reality for Harry is this: he's no longer seen as the prince defying tradition, but as the man who simply won't stop revisiting it. Harry is now the prince who won't stop talking, the one who's lost the respect of the institution, his family, and slowly, his audience. There's no clear path back, not because people are unforgiving, but because they've simply moved on. The space he once held has been filled by others. His legacy no longer looks like rebellion or reform. It looks like regret. Not regret for leaving, but for what he became after. Not for choosing love, but for turning his story into a commodity. Royalty has never been about bloodlines alone. It's about mystique, about knowing when silence says more than words. And Harry never learned that silence can be the most powerful weapon.